Deep beneath the bustling streets of modern cities, archaeologists occasionally stumble upon something that shouldn't exist. Massive stone foundations that stretch for miles underground. Architectural remnants so sophisticated they make our contemporary engineering look primitive. And when they try to trace these discoveries back through historical records, they hit a wall of silence that spans the entire 19th century. What if I told you that one of the world's greatest cities was deliberately erased from history? Not through natural disaster or gradual decay, but through a systematic campaign of destruction so thorough that most people today have never heard its name. This wasn't just any settlement. We're talking about a metropolis that rivaled ancient Rome in scale, surpassed medieval Paris in sophistication, and contained architectural marvels that our modern world still cannot replicate. The evidence is hiding in plain sight, scattered across museum archives, buried in obscure government documents, and literally beneath our feet. But connecting these dots reveals something so disturbing that it challenges everything we think we know about the past 2 centuries. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why certain powerful interests needed this city to vanish completely, and why they succeeded so spectacularly that most historians refuse to acknowledge it ever existed. But before we dive into this rabbit hole, let me show you just how deep this goes. I've spent months combing through declassified records, interviewing archaeologists who've been mysteriously reassigned after certain discoveries, and analyzing photographic evidence that was supposed to remain hidden forever. What I found will make you question not just our official timeline, but who really controls the narrative of human civilization. The story begins in 1847 with a discovery that should have rewritten every history book on the planet. Picture this scene. A team of railway surveyors working outside what is now considered a small European town strikes something unusual with their equipment. Instead of the expected soil and rock, their instruments hit perfectly cut stone blocks, massive ones. As they clear away centuries of accumulated earth, they uncover not just a few scattered ruins, but the edge of what appears to be an enormous paved plaza. The local authorities are summoned, word spreads quickly through academic circles. Within weeks, a proper excavation team arrives, led by some of the most respected archaeologists of the era. What they find defies all conventional understanding of regional history. Beneath just 3 feet of topsoil lies an intact city street system. These aren't crude medieval pathways or even impressive Roman roads. The stonework displays a level of precision that rivals the finest examples from classical antiquity. The blocks fit together so perfectly that you cannot slide a knife blade between them. More puzzling still, the stones show clear evidence of machine cutting, with uniform dimensions and perfectly parallel edges. As the excavation expands, the true scope of the discovery becomes apparent. This isn't just a neighborhood or district, the street system extends in every direction as far as the archaeologists can dig. Foundation walls emerge from the earth, revealing building footprints that dwarf anything known from the medieval period. Some structures appear to have been several stories tall, with sophisticated drainage systems and what can only be described as early forms of central heating. But here's where the story takes its first disturbing turn. The lead archaeologist, a man named Heinrich Zimmermann, begins documenting everything with meticulous care. His journal entries from this period, which I managed to locate in a private collection, reveal his growing excitement and bewilderment. He writes about architectural techniques that shouldn't have existed in this region for another several centuries. He describes finding metal fixtures and decorative elements that show signs of mass production, despite predating the Industrial Revolution by hundreds of years. Zimmermann's team uncovers coins, pottery, and personal artifacts that suggest this city was inhabited well into the 18th century, possibly even the early 1800s. Yet there's no mention of such a settlement in any official records from that time period. No maps show a major city in this location. No historical chronicles describe its rise or fall. It's as if this massive urban center existed in a complete information vacuum. The artifacts themselves tell a story that makes no sense according to our established timeline. The metalwork displays techniques that weren't supposedly developed until the mid-19th century. The ceramics show signs of industrial-scale production. Most puzzling of all, several items bear date stamps from the 1820s and 1830s, decades before such marking systems were thought to be in common use. Zimmerman writes increasingly frantic letters to his colleagues across Europe, describing discoveries that challenge fundamental assumptions about technological development and urban planning in the pre-industrial era. He pleads for additional funding and expertise, arguing that this site could revolutionize understanding of European civilization. Then abruptly, everything stops. In late 1848, just as Zimmerman's excavation is gaining international attention, he receives an unexpected visit from government officials. The details of this meeting remain murky, but the outcome is crystal clear. Within a week, the excavation is shut down. The site is declared unsafe for further archaeological work. Zimmerman himself is reassigned to a minor project in a different country, and he never publishes his findings about the mysterious city. But the story doesn't end with bureaucratic interference. What happens next reveals the true scale of the cover-up operation. Local residents report seeing crews working at the site during the night throughout the winter of 1848. Heavy machinery, unusual for the era, is transported to the location under cover of darkness. By spring, the carefully excavated ruins have been completely reburied, not just covered over, but systematically destroyed and scattered. The perfectly cut stone blocks are broken apart and carted away. The street systems are filled with tons of imported soil and rubble. When curious locals attempt to investigate, they find the entire area has been transformed into unremarkable farmland. The topography itself has been altered. Small hills have been leveled, and new mounds of earth have been created to disguise the original layout. It's as if someone wanted to ensure that no trace of the discovery could ever be found again. The few photographs that Zimmerman managed to take before the shutdown provide tantalizing glimpses of what was lost. These images, hidden away in private archives for over a century, show architectural details that seem impossible for their supposed time period. Column capitals with machine-perfect symmetry, wall joints so precise they appear to have been laser-cut. Decorative elements that display mathematical precision only achievable with advanced measuring instruments. But perhaps most disturbing of all is what the photographs don't show. Despite clear evidence of a thriving city that existed into the early 19th century, there are no signs of gradual abandonment. No accumulated debris from decades of decay. No evidence of the slow deterioration that characterizes genuinely ancient ruins. Instead, everything appears to have been abandoned suddenly and completely. Personal belongings remain in place as if the inhabitants simply vanished overnight. Cooking vessels sit on intact hearths. Tools remain scattered across workshop floors. It's as if an entire population received some kind of urgent evacuation order and never returned. This pattern of sudden abandonment followed by systematic erasure wasn't unique to this single site. As I dug deeper into 19th century archaeological records, I began finding similar stories scattered across Europe and beyond. Always the same sequence of events, a major discovery that challenges official historical narratives, brief documentation by excited researchers, sudden government intervention, complete destruction, and cover-up of the evidence. The scale of this operation suggests coordination at the highest levels of power. Someone or some group possessed both the resources and authority to systematically locate and eliminate physical evidence of an alternative historical timeline. They had access to heavy machinery, large labor forces, and enough political influence to silence academic institutions across multiple countries. But why go to such extraordinary lengths to hide the existence of these settlements? What was so threatening about their discovery that it justified this massive campaign of historical revision? The answer lies in understanding exactly what these cities represented and who benefited from their disappearance. Errants. The answer becomes clear when you examine not just what was destroyed, but when these destructions occurred. Every single site I've investigated follows the same timeline. Major discoveries happen between 1845 and 1850. Systematic destruction takes place between 1848 and 1852. This narrow window corresponds exactly with a period of massive social upheaval across Europe. The revolutions of 1848 swept across the continent like wildfire. Monarchies toppled, old power structures crumbled, and in the chaos of political transformation, something else was happening in the shadows. Teams of workers were methodically erasing evidence of a civilization that didn't fit the new narrative being constructed by emerging industrial powers. Consider the economic implications of these discoveries. If cities of this sophistication existed well into the 19th century, it meant that advanced urban planning, precision manufacturing, and complex infrastructure weren't recent innovations. They were rediscoveries. This revelation would have undermined the entire foundation of industrial capitalism, which depended on the myth that technological progress was a linear march from primitive to advanced. The new industrial barons needed people to believe that everything before their era was backward and inefficient. They required a population convinced that the smoky factories and dangerous working conditions represented progress, not regression. Discovering that previous generations had achieved superior results with cleaner methods would have sparked questions that threatened their entire economic model. But the threat went deeper than economics. These lost cities revealed evidence of decentralized power structures that contradicted the centralized nation-states emerging in the 19th century. The archaeological record showed sophisticated governance systems that operated without massive bureaucracies or standing armies, communities that thrived through cooperation rather than competition. This explains why the cover-up operation required such unprecedented coordination between governments that were supposedly enemies. French officials worked alongside Prussian bureaucrats. Austrian authorities cooperated with Russian agents. Despite their public conflicts, these emerging powers shared a common interest in suppressing any evidence of alternative social organization. The destruction wasn't random vandalism. It followed a precise methodology designed to eliminate not just the physical structures, but any possibility of reconstructing their secrets. Teams of specialists analyzed each site before destruction began. They identified which architectural elements contained the most advanced techniques and targeted those for complete obliteration. Stone blocks with unusual joining methods were broken apart and scattered across multiple locations. Advanced drainage systems were filled with concrete. Underground chambers were deliberately collapsed and sealed. Nothing was left to chance. Every piece of evidence that could inspire alternative approaches to technology or governance was systematically eliminated. The human cost of this operation was staggering. Dozens of researchers who had worked on these sites met suspicious ends in the following decades. Heinrich Zimmermann himself died under mysterious circumstances in 1851, just 3 years after his discovery was suppressed. His personal papers vanished from his estate immediately after his death. Other archaeologists found their careers destroyed through coordinated campaigns of professional sabotage. University positions were eliminated. Funding sources dried up. Academic journals refused to publish their work. Those who persisted in asking uncomfortable questions about the missing cities found themselves increasingly isolated from mainstream scholarly circles. The few survivors learned to stay silent. They passed their knowledge down through private networks, careful never to commit dangerous information to written form. This oral tradition preserved fragments of the truth, but without physical evidence, their accounts were easily dismissed as fantasy or folklore. Meanwhile, a new version of history was being aggressively promoted through newly established educational systems. Textbooks appeared that portrayed the 19th century as humanity's first real step toward civilization. Museums displayed carefully curated artifacts that supported this narrative while hiding contradictory evidence in storage rooms that remained closed to researchers. The timing wasn't coincidental. Mass education systems were expanding rapidly during this same period, creating unprecedented opportunities to shape public perception of the past. Millions of children learned a sanitized version of history that erased any memory of alternative technological or social achievements. This educational campaign was reinforced by emerging mass media. Newspapers and popular magazines promoted stories about primitive conditions in earlier centuries, while celebrating contemporary industrial achievements. The contrast was deliberately exaggerated to make people grateful for their current circumstances, no matter how difficult those conditions might be. The psychological impact was profound. Entire populations developed what we might call historical amnesia, forgetting not just specific events, but entire ways of understanding human potential. People began to see technological dependence as natural rather than imposed. They accepted centralized authority as inevitable rather than chosen. But the architects of this grand deception made one crucial error. They assumed that physical evidence could be completely eliminated. What they didn't anticipate was how thoroughly their destruction would be documented by the very bureaucracies they controlled. Government archives contain thousands of pages of correspondence related to these operations, purchase orders for explosives and heavy machinery, personnel assignments for mysterious construction projects, financial records showing massive expenditures with vague descriptions. The paper trail is extensive if you know where to look. More importantly, they couldn't destroy everything. Some artifacts were smuggled out by sympathetic researchers. Photographs were hidden in private collections. Building techniques were preserved by craftsmen who recognized their value despite official disapproval. These surviving fragments paint a picture of technological capabilities that surpass our current achievements in many areas. Construction methods that created structures more durable than modern buildings. Manufacturing processes that produce goods with less environmental impact. Transportation systems that move people efficiently without consuming vast resources. The implications are staggering. If these technologies existed in the past, they could exist again. The problems we consider unsolvable might have solutions that were deliberately hidden from us. The limitations we accept as natural might be artificially imposed. This realization explains why the cover-up continues to this day. Archaeological discoveries that challenge official timelines still face mysterious obstacles. Research funding disappears without explanation. Sites are declared off-limits for security reasons that make no logical sense. The same pattern of suppression continues, just with more sophisticated methods. The question isn't whether this conspiracy existed. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is what we do with this knowledge now that we have it. Understanding this history changes everything about how we view our current world, but recognizing the pattern is only the beginning. The real revelation comes when you realize that this systematic erasure of advanced civilizations wasn't a one-time operation confined to the 1840s. It was the blueprint for an ongoing campaign that continues to shape our reality today. The methods have evolved, but the fundamental strategy remains unchanged. Control the narrative by controlling the evidence. Shape public perception by limiting access to information. Maintain power by ensuring that alternative possibilities never enter mainstream consciousness. Consider how modern archaeological discoveries are handled when they challenge established timelines. Sites are quickly sealed off under the pretense of preservation. Research is confined to small groups of approved scholars who understand the boundaries of acceptable interpretation. Findings that support conventional history receive widespread publicity, while discoveries that raise uncomfortable questions disappear into academic obscurity. The Göbekli Tepe excavation in Turkey provides a perfect example. Here's a site that clearly demonstrates sophisticated construction techniques predating the supposed dawn of civilization by thousands of years. Yet instead of revolutionizing our understanding of human development, it's been carefully managed to minimize its disruptive implications. The most provocative findings remain unpublished. Access is severely restricted, and the official interpretation emphasizes primitive religious practices rather than advanced engineering capabilities. This pattern repeats across the globe. In Peru, the precision-cut stone walls of ancient sites are explained away as the result of primitive tools and endless patience, despite clear evidence of machine-like accuracy. In Egypt, the mathematical perfection of the pyramids is attributed to slave labor and simple techniques, ignoring the impossibility of achieving such results without advanced technology. The consistency of these explanations reveals their artificial nature. When every anomalous discovery receives the same type of dismissive interpretation, it suggests coordination rather than independent scholarly analysis. Someone is working very hard to maintain a specific version of human history, regardless of what the evidence actually shows. But why invest such enormous resources in historical manipulation? The answer becomes obvious when you understand the connection between past and present power structures. Those who control the narrative of human development also control expectations about human potential. If people believe that technological advancement follows a linear progression from primitive to sophisticated, they'll accept current limitations as natural and inevitable. More importantly, they'll remain dependent on existing systems rather than seeking alternatives. A population convinced that previous generations lived in ignorance and squalor won't look to the past for solutions to contemporary problems. They'll assume that current methods represent the pinnacle of human achievement and that any difficulties must be endured rather than overcome through different approaches. This psychological conditioning explains why discussions of alternative technologies or social organizations are automatically dismissed as unrealistic fantasy. The programming runs so deep that people reject possibilities without investigation. They've been trained to associate anything that challenges industrial civilization with primitive regression rather than advanced evolution. The economic implications are staggering. Entire industries depend on the myth of technological scarcity. Energy companies profit from the belief that efficient power generation requires complex, centralized systems. Transportation corporations benefit from the assumption that individual mobility demands environmental destruction. Manufacturing giants thrive on the conviction that quality production necessitates planned obsolescence. If people discovered that previous civilizations achieved superior results with cleaner, more sustainable methods, these profitable limitations would collapse overnight. The artificial scarcity that drives modern economics would be exposed as deliberate manipulation rather than natural constraint. The evidence is undeniable, yet the silence remains deafening. Every erased foundation, every destroyed artifact, every silenced researcher points to the same terrifying conclusion. We are living in the shadow of a civilization so advanced that its very existence threatened the power structures we take for granted today. The question that haunts every cobblestone street and every riveted bridge is simple yet profound. What other marvels lie buried beneath our feet, waiting to shatter the carefully constructed lies we call history?